Hey, what's up guys, back again with another video in the Spigot series. This time I'm going to show you how to make a Vanish plugin.
They call me the Raz, my girl she bad like Rihanna. I'm dripping dishonor, I turned to the mess now I feel like dishonor. I'm up in the penthouse, you gon' make a twerk while I'm in a recliner. Go up like a timer, and take him to church like she's singing a choir. It's hot like a sauna, they send me the racks and I get them.
Alright, so let's get started. So we're going to make a new project here, of course. And so now we click Spigot, next. And if you don't know what I'm doing right now, then you want to watch my other videos. There's 26, I believe, videos before this. So yeah, you might want to watch those if you don't know what's happening right now. So me.Illuminati Productions, and then we'll give the project a name. We'll just call it Vanish plugin, like that. And by the way guys, I issued a poll on the community section of the channel, and I asked you guys whether you want to use GitHub or GitLab instead of like what I usually use, and y'all voted for GitLab and GitHub. So I'm going to use GitLab to post all my code for big projects like these where I use like multiple files and stuff like that. So if you want to see the code for today's episode, make sure you look in the description below. I'll still have the link there for you, and instead of what I usually use, it's going to be a GitLab link. And if you don't know what GitLab is, it's just basically GitHub but way better. Anyway, so now let's go ahead and click next, and then we'll give it a name again. So Vanish plugin. There we go, looks good to me. So we'll click finish, and so it's going to create the the file for us, right? Alright, so I'm gonna open this up here. Open up the source so you can see all the files for your project, and then of course click enable auto import. So that's important in case you want to do that. So I'm gonna get rid of this because I don't really ever use that. And so the first thing I want to do here is make a new command, and so I'm just gonna make a package inside of here called commands. And so this is gonna be the command that they can type, where they can do /vanish, and then it's gonna vanish the player, right? So we're going to call it Vanish command, because it's going to vanish the player, obviously. And so whenever you make a command, obviously you want to do, I keep saying obviously, but what you want to do is do command executor, right? So that you can make the command, and then you want to implement the onCommand method here, right? Because it's a interface. So you're implementing this interface. Inside the interface, you have this method here that you want to implement. And so now we're doing that. So of course, turn this return false to return true, so that it does not repeat the command every time you type it into the game. So anyway, now let's make the the code for the command. So basically, like I said, it's going to allow the player to vanish themselves if they want to do that. So yeah, it's not going to be a really complex plugin. It's going to be kind of simple, but the way you want to vanish players is going to be kind of complex. So that's why I'm making this video. Plus, one of you guys suggested it, so that's why I'm doing it. Okay, so if player if Cinder's instance of player, we do this every time, but just to show you. And then now we can create everything else. So player is equal to player Cinder, if I can type correctly. So player Cinder. So this is going to be a object reference of the player, so that we can run commands on the player. So the first thing we want to do is, since we're making a type of command where we can toggle on and off whether they want to vanish or not, we're going to need a way to track and see if they're vanished or not, right? Because let's say we type /vanish and we're already vanished, right? Then we want to take the player out of vanish, and then so that's what they want to do, right? But the thing is, the hard part is how does the program know that you want to be able to toggle like that, okay? And so one of the main ways to do it is to create a array list. An array list can hold a list of players if that's what you want to do. So we're going to create an array list here, and we're going to use this array list to track and see which players are invisible, right? So for example, if they are on the array list, that means that the player is invisible. So you want to take them off that array list and then take them out of vanish, right? But if they do /vanish and they are not on the array list, and then you want to make them on the array list and then make them vanish, right? So that's how that would work, pretty simply. We've done this before for sure, but in case you don't know, this is what we're doing. So so let's go ahead and create it. We'll call it array list. Array list, not array. And then of course you need a data type, so we're going to be storing players. So we just plug in player like that. That's a generic type, so that's why you want to put in the thing like that, so it knows what data type you want to use. Anyway, so now we're going to give it a name, so we'll call it let's call it invisible list, because of course, like I said, we're tracking the invisible players on the server, right? So now we can check and see whenever they run the command whether they're on the list or not, okay? So let's try doing that, right? So if invisible list dot contains, and then we can plug in player like that. So if they contain the player that ran the command, then that means that they're on the list, right? So that means we want to make them come out of vanish because they're already on the list, right? So let's try doing that. So we're going to do invisible list dot remove player because they're already on the list. As you can see here, it says invisible list.contains player. So if it already contains the player, then we want to remove the player, right? Because it's toggling, right? So invisible list.remove player, and then let's send the player a message telling them that they were that they're now visible, right? So you are now visible to other players on the server. Okay, so that's how that would work. And now we need to actually make them visible and invisible, right? But let's just wait a second. First, let's get the other option so we can check and see if they're not on the list, right? And then we'll add them to the list. So else if not a visible list contains player. So if the invisible list does not contain the player, then we're going to do what's inside of here, right? And we know it's not because we put the not operator in front, which is going to be the exclamation point. So now we want to add them to the list. So invisible list.add, and then we just plug in player just like that. So the player is now added to the list, and then we'll send the player a message telling them that they are now invisible. So you are now invisible. Okay? So how do we actually make a player invisible? That's actually the tricky part that I want to show you. So there's a special little method here you can run on the player object. So player.hidePlayer. So according to what you see from here, you might think that the player will be able to just hide themselves with this method, but that's not actually how it works. What it does is you use player.hidePlayer to tell it which players to hide you from, basically, right? But the way we need to do it is basically loop through every player on the server and then hide you, or call that method on every single player so it hides you from each player, okay? Because you have to call the method individually on each player. You can't just hide yourself automatically from all the players on the server. You have to specifically say which players you want to hide yourself from, okay? It's kind of weird, but that's how it works. So we do for, and then we'll just loop through every player on the server. So we'll do player people, so this will loop through. So we're creating a variable here called people, which is going to be basically a loop or a representation of all the players, or each player basically. So you'll see. So bucket.get online players. Okay, so it's going to get all the online players and then loop through each one. So whenever it comes to a player, then we want to do people.hide player. So it's going to hide the player from this person that you just selected from the online players. Okay. And so if we do control P to see what the parameters are, we can see that there's two options, okay? The first option is deprecated because it's crossed out, as you can see here, right? But the next option is not deprecated. First you want to provide the plugin, and then next you want to provide the player. So we need an instance of the plugin itself, right? So we can only do that from the main class. We need to get an instance of the main class is basically what I'm trying to say, right? So how do we do that? Of course, we've done this before, but if you don't know, we need to create a reference of the main class. So YouTube, or no, not YouTube, I mean, what's it called? It's called Vanish plugin. So Vanish plugin, and we'll just give it a name of plugin. And now we need to create a constructor for this class that will be able to take that as a parameter, basically. And then now we can go back into the main method here, or the main class here, and then register this command. And so we'll say Vanish, so set executor, and we'll say new Vanish command. Oops, Vanish command. So inside of the parameters for the Vanish command, we just pass in this, which is going to be the instance of the main class that we can pass in there. So, oh, I see what I did wrong. We accidentally did invisible list as the parameter, but instead we want to do Vanish plugin as the player, okay? Or as the parameter. So we'll do Vanish plugin, plugin, and then we'll do the same thing here. So plugin, and then plugin. That shouldn't have happened, but there we go. That should fix it. Add your semicolon right there. And so now we should be able to pass an instance of the main class into the Vanish command class so that we can use it down here. So now, again, it's asking for the main class as, or a plugin as the first parameter. So all we got to do now is just plug in plugin just like that. So plugin, and then now we need a second parameter, which is going to be the player that you want to hide from, right? So I'll explain this in a second, but what we're going to do here is just plug in player just like that. So now what this is going to do effectively, right? It's looping through every single player on the server, right? So what it's doing here is it's going to each player. So people is people here, this variable here is going to be a representation of each player every time it loops through, right? So we have one person here, so people, which is going to be that single person that you selected from the online players list. So people, and then dot hide player. And so you're going to use this method to hide someone else from you, basically, right? Don't get confused. People is not the same as player in this case, okay? Player is going to be the person who ran the command, but people is going to be everyone that's on the server that you're trying to hide from, okay? So you're going to call this method on every player on the server to hide yourself from that player, or from you, basically, right? Hopefully that makes sense. And then you're just passing yourself as a parameter, right? Or the person who ran the command, really. So hopefully that makes sense. That's just how it works. If you don't understand it, then just pause the video and look at the code closely so that you can try and understand it, okay? So what that's going to do here, of course, is make you invisible to each player on the server because we're looping through and we're hiding ourselves from each person, right? So now up here, when we're taking ourselves off the invisible list, and now we want to show ourselves to each player. So we can just copy this. Instead of hide player, we're going to do show player. So we're showing ourselves to each player on the server. So that's how that works. It's kind of simple, but kind of complicated at the same time. So hopefully you understand that. So the only thing left to do right now is actually test it, right? So we can make sure that it works correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and compile this in the Maven. And what it's going to do here is create a target folder and then output the plugin to that target folder so that we can use it and add it to our server for testing, right? So let it compile everything and I'll be right back. Alright, so we're on the server now, or we're loading onto it. So I loaded the plugin, and so let's test it out. So we'll do /pl to make sure the plugin is here. And yep, it says Vanish plugin. But yeah, I just remembered that we forgot to register the command within the plugin.yml. So let's go ahead and do that before we test it out, because we can't test it out unless it's actually registered. Anyway, so let's go here, and we'll do just commands like that. And then now we type in the command. So vanish, and then description, vanishes you from the world. Alright, so that's pretty simple. So let's go ahead and compile this, and again, I'll be right back. Okay, so I reloaded, and we can test it out now. So we'll do /vanish, and boom, it says you are now invisible, and so we should be invisible. We are not invisible to ourselves, but if we get my other account on the server, it should prove that I'm invisible right now. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so I'm on the server with my other account, so I'll teleport to my invisible account, or hopefully it's invisible, and so I'm here right now, and I can see myself, but if I do /vanish on my other account again, I should turn invisible. So if I go back here, oh, I made myself visible, so if I, toggle it back to invisible, it should work. So if I go back here now, so why was I invisible even though I already typed /vanish? Well, if you think about it, the way it works is whenever I do /vanish, it's going to get every player on the server and then make myself invisible to all those players. But I can't be invisible to a player that wasn't on the server when I was made invisible, right? When it made that loop, when it did that for loop, through every player on the server, it didn't make me invisible to the players that weren't even on the server, obviously, right? Because they weren't on the server. So basically we have a problem here is that every time a new player joins that wasn't on the server when I was made invisible, they will be able to see me, of course, because that's just how it works, right? So they can bypass it, right? So what we want to do here is make it so that, well, one way to do it at least is to make it so that every time a player joins the server, it's going to check and see what players are on the invisible list, okay? And then if they're on the visible list, then you want to hide yourself or hide that player from yourself, okay? Basically, so that should make sense, but it's better to show you, so let's get right into it. So what I'm going to do here is create a new event, so we're going to make an events package. So events like that, and it's going to be a join event, right? So whenever a player joins the server, right? So join events, and we're going to implement listener. Oops, implements listener. Of course, import the correct one from bucket or Spigot, whatever, kind of the same thing at this point. And so now what you want to do is make an annotation here, so event handler, and now we can make our event. So public void player join, and then we'll say player join method. Oops, player join events, not a method. Player join events. So E, we'll give it the name of E. So every time a player joins, this will be triggered, right? And so the first thing we want to do is check and see. And what we want to do is loop through every player that is on the invisible list, and then take those players and then make them invisible to me so that I can't see them, okay? So what we want to do is, loop through it like I said. So for int I is equal to 0, I is less than invisible list, right? But I can't access invisible list from this class because it's in this class, right? So what I'm going to do here is actually move Arraylist invisible list into my main class so that I can access it anywhere. I mean, I can still access it from anywhere even if I had it in here. All I got to do is make it public or something like that. But I want to put it in here just from our structure. So we're going to move it here. So Arraylist invisible list is going to be accessible in here. So now I need to go back into this here and do plugin dot invisible list if I want to access it within my command still, my command class, like that. And it's still, what's the problem here? It says invisible list is not public, so we need to go back here and just simply make it public so that we can access it, right? So now those errors go away, so we can do plugin dot invisible list like that, and that should be it for that. So now let's go back to our event here and try accessing invisible list. All we need to do is do plugin dot, oh wait, we don't have plugin, right? So again, we need to make a reference to the main class from here. Okay, so we're gonna make a Vanish plugin reference. So Vanish plugin, and then code generate constructor like that. And so so that now works. And now we can go back here and register the event. So get server .get plugin manager .register events listener. So new join event, and then this like that. Oops, not like that. That's going to be the parameter, so we just plug in this as the parameter, and then we'll just put this right there. So that's going to basically register the event for us, and then we're passing an instance of this main class into the parameter for join event. So now we can go back into join event and then access plugin .invisible list. So now we have access to the invisible list from another class like this one right here. So I is less than invisible list dot size. So it's going to get the size of the invisible list, so we know how many players are inside of it. And then I++. So basically what that's going to do is loop through every single player that could be on the invisible list, alright? And also let's make a player reference here. So player is equal to e.getPlayer, so the player that joined the server, and then import player, of course. And now we can go ahead and make all of these players invisible to me. So player.hidePlayer, pass in plugin, and then we could simply do plugin.invisiblelist.get, and then whatever index that we're currently on, right? So again, just to explain what it's going to do here is every time I join the server, or anyone joins the server, it's going to get an instance of you basically, right? And then it's going to loop through every single player that's on the invisible list. And if there are players on the invisible list, it's going to loop through each one and then make that player invisible to you, the player. And then yeah, that's really it, right? So now we can go back here. Looks good to me. Looks good to me still. And so let's go ahead and run compile the plugin, okay? Alright, so I've loaded the plugin on my server. I'm going to go ahead and reload and just go ahead and rejoin so that I can make sure that I'm visible to every player on the server, just to make everything reset basically, so we can test it out. Oh wait, let's not connect it with this one yet, okay? So yeah, what we're going to do here is try doing /vanish with our main account. So vanish, and now it says you are now invisible, so I should be invisible to the other players on the server. So if there were players on, I should be invisible to them. So now let's join with my other player that I did not join the server yet, and I should still be invisible, if I did this correctly at least. So now I'm on the server with my other account, and I don't see my other account. So let's teleport to my other account just to make sure. Alright, so I teleported my other account in front of me, and I cannot see my main account because it's invisible still, even though I joined late after the command was run, because it now works. It checks to see who's on the invisible list every time I join a server or anyone else joins the server, right? So that's how you do that. That's actually it for this plugin. I was actually going to do like a thing where like the admins can see who's invisible and like see their name tag like all grayed out and stuff like that, but I couldn't figure out, well, I could figure out how to change their name tag, but it involves some advanced techniques that I don't want to teach in this video. So it's going to be involving packets and stuff like that, so I don't want to show that quite yet, but I'll be showing you some advanced stuff like that in the future, because packets are pretty huge in terms of doing some crazy stuff, okay? But anyway, I hope you liked this video. I hope it wasn't too hard for you. It was actually kind of simple. If you have any questions though, I'll be glad to help you. Just ask a question in the comment section below. Or you can join our Discord. We have a Discord link in the description also. We have like 100 people at least in there, so make sure you join, hang out with us, talk with us, anything you want to do. It's pretty cool in there. Also, all the code again will be in the description too, so make sure you click that link and it'll take you to the code in case you want to download it, or look at it, just whatever you want to do. It's all your choice. Bookmark it for future reference, because sometimes you forget the code that you learn. I do it all the time. But anyway, I'll stop rambling now. If you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe, and peace.